Hello again. In this video, I want to show you how to use that bare bones reading strategy that I mentioned in your class today. And I want to tell you before I even get started, if it sounds like I'm in a war zone, I promise everything's okay. The television in our house tonight is louder than I've ever heard it. So I closed all the doors, but if you hear the random weird noise, it is the television. So I hope it's not a nuisance. All right, I'm going to do this illustration in the section of my notebook that is not in the textbook, even though the passages are from the textbook. It's from that Stromberg text. And I just picked out a couple of passages from the textbook to illustrate the strategy that I wanted to show you. And I should have written the page down. Let me see if I can tell you, if I can find it on my Kindle. Yes, this one about diverticula is on page 691, somewhere in that neighborhood. So, sorry, I should have made that note very clear. But here's how I would approach this passage. This is a tough passage to read. Not only are there scientific words, but it's just hard for me to read. It's not indented. It's just written a little bit differently than I'm used to. But the strategy still works. So I'm not even going to read the passage first. I'm going to pick a highlighter, and I've used this same system for so long. I know that yellow is my keyword color. So the first thing I do when I look at bare bones of a passage, this is like the skeleton of a passage. We're taking away all the muscle and the skin and the tendons and the little things like eyelashes and capillaries. We're taking all of that away to just see the structure of the passage. So imagine that you are just looking for the bare bones, the thing that literally holds this paragraph together without all the fluff. So when I do this kind of thing, the first thing I look for are words in bold or words in italics. If the words look different than the words around them, there's a reason for that. So I see that in three situations. I see the header, which is very important. I see the word diverticulum, and then I see the word diverticulosis. Okay. Now, in my past, I am familiar with diverticulitis, but that's not exactly the same thing, I'm guessing. But we'll read to find out. So the first thing I do, I mark off the words that look different. Sometimes you'll have words underlined, you'll have words in italics, you'll have things in all caps, and those are definitely bare bones. Then I look at these words and see if I can find the definition. So the word diverticulum refers to a small blind pouch resulting from a protrusion of the mucous membranes of a hollow organ through weakened areas of the organ's muscular wall. Gracious, that's a lot. But all I really want to know in bare bones is that it's a small blind pouch. That's all I'm interested in right now. Okay, the word diverticulosis, let's see if we can find the meaning of that word. So I'm going to look at the sentence in which the word is contained. And it says, when diverticula are present, the patient is said to have diverticulosis. Well, this is diverticula, not diverticulum. But I am guessing that diverticula is the plural form of diverticulum. This is one. Diverticula are more than one. Now, I can't promise you that that's true. Your instructors would know immediately. But I'm just guessing that that's the case. I could be wrong. But this sentence right here says when diverticula are present, those little blind pouches, the patient has diverticulosis. So the word diverticulosis simply means that those pouches are present. Okay, I'm getting somewhere. This is still, I'm far from understanding this passage, but I've got some of the bare bones. I know the things that we're talking about. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, from many years of habit, I'm going to look for the nouns in this passage. Nouns are persons, places, or things. Now, I don't want the common nouns like the word term, even though that's a noun, it's so common, it's not really relative to what I'm doing. I'm looking at this through a medical lens. So I'm looking for medical nouns. Let's do it that way. I see mucous membranes. I see organs, muscular wall. I see older adults. I see intestinal tract, colon. There's patient. That's a pretty common one. There's diverticulosis, but I've already highlighted that one. Diverticula, we've already highlighted that one. I see some numbers. These are important. These are always bare bones. If you see numbers, highlight those. 50 years, we're looking at younger than 50 years, and then we're looking at older than 90 years. Those numbers are important. Okay, here's a medical term. Intra-abdominal pressure. That phrase is important, I think. Constipation, that's one of the conditions we've already looked at. Then we have straining, obesity, we have a low fiber diet. Those are all things that I suspect are relevant here. So again, I'm just looking at bare bones. And you may be thinking, Amanda, would it not be easier to just read the passage? And for some people, yes, it is. For me, it's not. Because remember, words don't work well with my brain. I like numbers, I like diagrams, but when you give me words, things don't go well. So this method works very well for me. It may not work as well for you. I'm just sharing a strategy that may help. Okay, now that I've got all this done, now that I've got all this highlighting done, essentially what I'm going to do, and I will come back to this and undo this, but I'm going to cross out everything, if I can make this happen, that isn't highlighted. So I'm literally going to cut away the stuff that I didn't highlight. I should have highlighted that word protrusion. So let me back up. Protrusion is a noun. Okay. So there goes that screaming on television. I hope you guys cannot hear that. I'm taking out everything that I didn't highlight. Now, I'm not going to do that. You get the gist of it. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read this aloud, just reading the highlighted parts. Okay. Protrusion, I meant to highlight. So let's take that one. Okay. So just looking at the highlighted areas, let's read this. We have diverticula, diverticulum, small blind pouch, protrusion, mucous membranes, organs, muscular wall. Adults, intestinal tract, colon. Diverticula are present, diverticulosis. Younger than 50 years, older than 90 years. Intra-abdominal pressure from constipation and straining, obesity, low fiber diet, colon. And you may be thinking, this lady's nuts. I mean, that makes less sense than what I have read in this book. And that may be true. If that is the case, please do not watch the rest of this video. I don't want to confuse you. I see these red areas. I need a little clarification here. I've got younger than 50 years and older than 90 years, but I don't know the significance of those numbers. I want to look at what those numbers mean. So the sentence says it is uncommon, it meaning diverticulosis, it is uncommon in people younger than 50 and almost universal, which means very common, in those older than 90 years. All right, here's the magic of this for me. It's not enough for me to highlight the areas and just keep going. I take a Post-it note. Let me see if I can pull one up here. And I use Post-it notes so that I can stick them onto my book. I can just leave them where I'm writing the notes. I'll show you what I mean. And here's what I do. I take the highlighted part, the bare bones, and I put this into terms that I can understand. All right? So I ask myself, if I had to narrow this down to one word in this passage, that is the main bare bone, that is the primary bare bone, what would it be? Well, if I have a header, it's going to be that header. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to say diverticula. Now remember, I'm putting this in my own words. I recommend that you write it instead of type it, but if typing works for you, so be it. So diverticula, and remember that's the plural of the word. One is a diverticulum, are small pouches that protrude or stick out from the mucous membranes of the colon. Okay. When present, patient has diverticulosis. Now, you could even stop right here. Just depends on how much detail you need. If your goal is to define diverticulum, diverticulosis, diverticula, you've done it. So you can stop here if you want to. I would go ahead just because I'm a detail freak. I like to add as much detail as I can, and this is not going to work for me. So let's resize it. That's still not going to work. So I may not be able to, no, I can. Let me see if I can squeeze it in here. Okay, it tells me that it's uncommon in people less than 50 years old. It's almost always found in people older than 90. So I'm going to say older than 90 years. Okay. I'm going to list some symptoms. It's going to increase intra-abdominal pressure. It is going to be linked to constipation and straining for bowel movements, obesity, low fiber diets are factors in the development of colon diverticula. So this can happen in other places besides the colon, but this particular passage is focusing on colon diverticula. So any of those other details that you feel like you need to add, that's fine. But I'm happy with that. This is all I need to know. This is the bare bones for me. So I would take that Post-it note and I would keep that in my book, in my own handwriting. Whoa, sorry. I'm having iPad problems tonight, guys. All right, so here's the finished note, and I would just stick that on that paragraph of my book. And when time comes to review what I've learned, I would review the Post-it note. Now, if you have lectures where your instructor's talking more about diverticula, I would turn to this post-it note and I would add notes to my post-it note. I would take the notes that I've already found and add on to those as needed. Okay? I am not necessarily suggesting that you do this with every paragraph. I personally would. All right? Because that's just my learning style. It works for me. But it doesn't mean that you have to do it every time. Look at passages that are tough for you and do it for those. If you find a certain paragraph is really giving you trouble, try this. Take a picture with your cell phone if you don't want to write in your book. Print the picture off, grab you some highlighters, and break it down to bare bones. And I think it will help you with those really tough paragraphs.